Welcome to Paymetric's webinar, Securing the Enterprise for Call Center Solutions. Let's talk about the challenges for merchants in securing their call centers. Most significantly are the high PCI audit costs. There is a cost associated each year with maintaining your PCI compliance certification, and depending on the scope of your PCI audit, that cost can be quite significant. A customer service representative exposure to raw card data significantly increases your PCI liability. In fact, according to Experian, 80% of the data breaches that they've serviced had a root cause in employee negligence. The ones that tend to grab the headlines are when there's a hack, a breach of some sort related to a hack to a system, a breach in a firewall, somebody installing a rogue piece of hardware to capture credit card information. But the majority of those breaches do have a root cause in an employee just making a wrong decision. Now, PCs and networks that are handling raw card data also increase the PCI scope that a merchant has. The on-site storage of cardholder data, whether that's in a centralized database, whether that's in distributed databases across different applications, that on-site storage makes companies more vulnerable to data breaches because the data that can be compromised and used fraudulently does exist within the merchant environment. And then PCI audit time increases as PCI scope increases. Over time, if a company acquires other companies, as they try and merge in disparate systems, if they launch new e-commerce sites, new platforms, bring in another ERP system, another application, etc., there are likely more and more places, more and more channels through which cards are being accepted, and more back-end databases where that card data could be stored. So certainly as a company grows, the chance that their scope for a PCI audit will also increase. Paymetric has solutions to help you secure that information and the entry of that data in your call centers. We're going to focus on three of them here, and in this diagram you can see on the left-hand side there's several smaller circles. One is labeled P2p, another is Secure Manual Entry, and those are both attached to the CSR bubble. You can see another circle labeled Email Trigger, and then one labeled IVR, and those are attached to the call center circle. In the middle is Paymetric's data center, where the XI Secure and XI Intercept solutions are housed. And then finally, off to the far right, after that information has been passed through Paymetric to be secured and tokenized, that token is returned back to the merchant data center. So let's define each of these solutions, and we'll start with P2p, or point-to-point encryption. Card data is encrypted at a PIN pad, a physical device, a hardware device that is usually connected to a workstation via a USB cable. That device, that PIN pad, enables the point-to-point encryption before it enters your network. So the workflow would be that when it's time to capture card details, the CSR would be on the phone with the customer, and the customer would read that card information over the phone to the CSR. Rather than using their standard keyboard to enter the card details directly into, say, an SAP application, they would instead use the PIN pad, the 10-key pad, the point-to-point encryption device, to enter those card details. And when the card number is captured and submitted from that device, it's immediately encrypted locally on the device, and then it's transmitted over the merchant's network out to Paymetric, where we receive that encrypted card number, and we have a shared key, so we'll decrypt that card number and then immediately tokenize it and return that token back to the PIN pad device so that the token can then be populated onto whatever field of whatever application the CSR had their cursor on. So because the card information is encrypted locally on the device before it is transmitted, it is secure before being exposed to any other portion of the merchant's network or any of the merchant's applications. The next solution is called IVR, or Interactive Voice Response System. the CSR again would have the customer on the phone, and when it's time for the customer to give their card number, rather than reading it over the phone so that the CSR can take it down and type it in, the customer would be redirected to an IVR solution. So you would hear the phone click, you would have some instructions that are given by the system for you to either enter your card details with the phone keypad, or perhaps even speak them, and the IVR system will recognize the spoken numbers and convert them to digital. But in either case, the IVR solution would capture those card details and then would send that information to be tokenized via a web service out to Paymetric. So just another way to capture and tokenize card details. In this case, the CSR would not be a part of that workflow stream. The CSR has redirected the customer to an interactive voice response system. The CSR would not hear the tones, nor would they hear the spoken numbers if the consumer or the customer is speaking those numbers. So a slight variation on the security here, but this is one that takes the CSR out of the workflow. And finally, email link. This would be where a customer receives an email link and enters the card data into their own web browser through a self-service method. So in this scenario, the customer is on the phone with the CSR. It's time for the customer to provide payment information. The CSR would generate, and again we're calling this email link, it could just as easily be an SMS text message, but would generate some type of correspondence that's sent to the consumer so that they receive it, and the link in that message would open up a browser session that points to a website that's hosted generally by the merchant, and immediately they would see fields for the entry of the card details. They would type those card details in on their own either mobile device or their own workstation or laptop, and then submit that information. And there would be an immediate call from that browser session on the consumer's device out to the merchant's tokenization account with Paymetric, and the card number would be tokenized, and then that information would be stored in the tokenization account of the merchant on the Paymetric side. Generally what happens is you then enable a remote function call to push those details back to the merchant's environment. Perhaps you even push those all the way back into an SAP or an Oracle system and populate the credit card payment fields of a sales order or something similar, perhaps update a customer's master record. The intent here is that not only are you removing the CSR from the workflow, you're also removing the exposure of the raw card from any system, network, or application within the merchant's environment. By redirecting the customer to enter that information themselves on their device, you are now making that a self-service feature that the customer completes themselves, and the exposure to the raw card happens on the customer's own device, not anywhere within the merchant's environment. Now let's go into these a little deeper, and first we're going to drill into the Paymetric XI Intercept point-to-point encryption. Again, we talked about how that's a pin pad device. Generally it looks like a 10 keypad. It's connected via a USB device to the CSR's workstation. The intent here is to capture and encrypt the card details as soon as possible, and never to allow them to traverse the merchant's network in a raw format. You don't want to enter those card details directly into an application like SAP or Oracle. You never want them to be transmitted across the network in an unsecured manner. So a point-to-point encryption solution can help remove call center workstations, virtual terminals, and keyboards from your PCI DSS cardholder data environment, or CDE is a common acronym that you'll hear for cardholder data environment. The intent of a point-to-point encryption solution is to simplify your annual PCI DSS audit, as well as minimize the risk of data exposure during a breach, because the card details are encrypted locally on the device and will never be transmitted across any of your internal networks in a raw format, there's nothing like a keylogger, a sniffer, a hidden or rogue database that will ever be able to capture and retain the raw card because it was encrypted on the device before it left the device. And finally, using a P2p encryption solution helps maintain full integration with call center systems and applications. Because it is just a separate little pin pad and it generally acts and communicates with your workstation just like a keyboard would, you can use that device to enter card details in essentially any application you wish. The encryption, the security of the card number happens on the device itself, and then once the token's returned, that would be passed into whichever application the CSR is currently using. Now, Paymetric's XI Intercept point-to-point encryption solution immediately tokenizes sensitive cardholder data at the pin pad to help eliminate your network and PCs from PCI scope and also to help protect you from data breaches. We do this by taking a holistic approach to security by leveraging point-to-point encryption and tokenization, somewhat of a hybrid solution there. So encrypted locally on the device, the token is returned back to the merchant so that the token can be used in subsequent payment or credits, returns, subsequent billing for recurring billing types solutions. But the token is returned to the merchant system, and by using this hybrid, we can help eliminate call center workstations and keyboards from PCI scope. The Paymetric Interactive Voice Response Solution, let's dive a little deeper into that. The XI Intercept integration into an IVR solution is generally done via web services at a point in the workflow logic of the IVR that's exposed by the IVR vendor themselves. So in this scenario, card data is entered by the customer through an interactive voice response system, and again, that's generally done either by the customer keying in the number on the pin pad of their phone or by speaking it and the system recognizing those words and converting them to digital form. But the use of an interactive voice response solution helps remove the CSR from the workflow of even hearing the card details, and will then also help remove the CSR's workstation, any virtual terminals or keyboards that CSR would be using from the PCI DSS cardholder data environment. Because the CSR doesn't hear the number, they will never type it in on their keyboard. That will never be exposed into applications that the CSR is running. That all happens directly between the IVR solution and the customer as they've been passed off to this other phone system, which the CSR has no ability to listen to. This approach will help reduce the risk for internal data breach. Again, you're limiting the number of systems on which the raw card data is exposed. In doing so, it's going to help you simplify your annual PCI DSS audit. You can see that there's many systems that now no longer are within the workflow of capturing and tokenizing card data. And you likely already have an IVR solution in place, so there's not going to be any additional hardware cost associated with this type of solution. That's different from the pin pad solution. Obviously, you'll need to purchase as many little pin pad devices as you intend to use. Here, it's mostly a software solution where we're just making a web service call for tokenization from the IVR solution once the card details have been captured. Again, this can integrate with your existing IVR solution. We'll just need to work with the vendor on the touch points where we can plug in and integrate our tokenization web service. And finally, this does also help you maintain full integration with all of your call center systems and applications. So any system today which you're using the IVR to capture card details for and then push those details into that application, that workflow would remain as it is today. There would be no change to your CSR's user experience. They would have the consumer on the phone. They may position their cursor on a credit card field within a certain application and then say to the consumer, or to the customer, I'm going to redirect you to this IVR solution where you can enter your card details, and once you're finished, you'll be sent back to me. The customer goes ahead and enters their card details, they're tokenized and secured, and then pushed off to the CSR's application. No change in the workflow from how it would be happening today, where that raw card would be captured by the IVR and then passed back to the customer service agent. So Paymetric's XI Intercept IVR solution interfaces with your existing IVR. You could certainly purchase a new IVR solution if you don't have one today, but it does interface with those IVR solutions and tokenizes sensitive cardholder data to eliminate your CSR, the network and PCs that your CSR are using, from PCI scope, and in turn help minimize the risk of data breaches. And the last solution, again, the Paymetric XI Intercept email link. In this scenario, the customer would receive an email link, perhaps a text message, whatever form of communication you want to use, but traditionally an email link. And they would receive that in their inbox. When they open that up, it will contain a link that, once clicked on, would open up a web browser session and point to a URL of a merchant-hosted page. And on that page, when it pulls up and renders, it would have XI Intercept for e-commerce integrated into that page, so that Paymetric is rendering the fields for capturing the cardholder details, the card type, the card number, the expiration date, maybe even the security code. The customer would enter those details directly into those XI Intercept rendered fields, but they're doing that on their own device. So this is not the CSR doing it, it is the customer or consumer doing it themselves on their smartphone, on their laptop, on their workstation, whichever device they happen to be using. This approach removes the CSR from exposure to the raw card. It also removes any call center workstations that CSR is using, any virtual terminals or keyboards from the PCI holder data environment. Again, the card details are captured in a customer self-service mode by the customer themselves on their own device. So in eliminating all of these different applications and networks from exposure, you're going to simplify your annual PCI DSS audit. You're going to reduce the scope of the systems and networks you have to take a look at. Again, there's no additional hardware costs. This is mostly a software solution. So you would be able to send these links out and then let the customer enter those details on whichever device they're using at the moment. By removing the exposure of the card from as many systems as possible, again, we're going to minimize the risk of data exposure during a breach. And because the first exposure of the card details in this scenario anywhere within the merchant environment would be as a token, you've now effectively eliminated, through any channels this is integrated with, the exposure of raw cards in the merchant environment altogether. So a very secure method of capturing those details. It also helps you maintain full integration with any call center systems and applications. So Paymetric's XI Intercept email link solution tokenizes sensitive cardholder data from the customer's web browser to eliminate your CSR, your network and PCs, from PCI scope and protect you from data breaches effectively by eliminating the exposure of the raw card details completely from your environment. That concludes this particular webinar on how to secure call center applications. If you need additional information or would like to follow up with us, here are some ways that you can contact us. You can certainly go out to our homepage at paymetric.com. There's a toll-free number listed where you'll be put in touch with someone within the Paymetric organization who can take down your questions and make sure that the proper person to answer those will get back with you. And you're also always free to send an email to info@paymetric.com, and we will return a response as quickly as possible. I'd like to thank you for your time today, and we look forward to hearing from you.